before our short break, we were talking a little bit about, we're almost getting started with our real estate transactions. And like promised, we're going to talk a little bit about an overview of what really happens to our real estate transactions once it gets started. Sometimes this can get a little bit overwhelming, so we'll try our best to make it as simple as possible. If you have any questions, as always, please use that chat section or just say hi. We want to hear from you guys. Make sure that you're there. But yes, so let's get started with the real estate transaction. So what is a real estate transaction, or how are we representing them? So real estate transactions, basically these are the process wherein we can get to start the buying and selling process of a house. Sometimes if we're going to be dealing with landlords and tenants and those kinds of things, or your agents are operating with rentals, you can also get to deal with those kinds of transactions. So those are still included in the real estate. We don't just represent the buying or selling of homes, we also represent rentals and the tenants. So it's also added there. Rental properties can also be managed. Real estate professionals assist with all these types of transactions and get paid for each one. Now, the payment for each are by commissions, as you know. So they get paid at the end of the transaction. They don't get paid by the hour that they're helping a buyer find a house or a seller market their home. The types of representations that we get to encounter in these transactions are either representing the buyer or the buyer of the house, representing sellers, or as you know, selling the house, or we also have dual representations, as we call it. When we call it dual representations, the agent gets to represent the buyer and the seller of the transaction. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are also other kinds of representations besides the actual buy and sell. We also have processes or representations wherein our agents gets to represent the landlord or the owner of the home renting the property, and tenants for those that are looking to rent the property. So that also happens. Again, it depends on the agent that you are working with and the state that you're in. Sometimes, for example, houses can also include tiny homes. Some state also include RVs, which is kind of hard because it is a property, but they're on wheels. So that's a challenge. It depends. So you have to be very open as to what are the things that your agents are also navigating themselves with. So let's talk a little bit about buyer agents. So as we mentioned earlier, you have your buyer agent, your seller agent. Your buyer agent gets to be the one to represent the buyers. So what do they usually do? Buyer agents give the buyer advice on whom to talk to be pre-approved. When we say pre-approved, that is actually the initial process of buying a home. If you've experienced buying a home before, this would mean that you get to talk to the financial consultants that you have, make sure that you have the capacity to actually purchase a house. So if you are pre-approved, as they say, it means that your financial consultant or your lender, as we call it in the transaction, they get to also clear you off. Like, okay, Robin is already good to buy a house. He can already go ahead and purchase a home right now. Or maybe Hazel is not as pre-approved yet, so she's gonna have to submit some things. So those kinds of stuff. As a buyer agent, we get to advise them about who to talk to if they don't have anyone in mind, or at least make sure that they are talking to the right person. As a buyer agent, we don't get to be the one to help them with the lending process or being pre-approved. We have to always just advise them as to who to talk to. The lender will be the one to take care of that. It's kind of not a very good practice to give them advice if you are not licensed as a lender or as a financial consultant, because it's very tricky. For example, for right now, or at least during the pandemic, there's a lot of things that are going on in the market, and sometimes the interest rate can dance as much as it goes, because the market goes up and then it goes down and then up again, and then sometimes it just jumps up. And if you're not a lender, or if you're not an actual financial consultant, sometimes the decision that you the influence that you can give to a buyer can make them decisions that are not as helpful as you may think they are. So it's best that instead we just advise them to talk to an actual financial consultant who can really guide them in making the right decisions. What else? Alerts the buyers to buy, or sorry, alerts the buyers to homes on the market that matches them. So, for example, for each team that we are coaching right now and the ones that we are strategizing with, we really give them checklists to guide the buyers that they have as to what exactly are the houses that they can look at, and what are the houses that actually matches what they need. If you're going to be an inside sales associate, that's also one thing to keep in mind, because sometimes if you're going to talk to a person, hi, hello, my name is Chris, I just want to help you out, what kind of home are you looking for? Sometimes they don't really know what to tell you. They're going to tell you, I'm looking for a house that is as big as my previous house, 5 bedrooms, etc., etc. But then again, if you get to at the bottom of the actual things that they would need, you get to find out that they don't really need that much bedroom, or sometimes they need more, and sometimes they need something else that they may not have anticipated before. So we get to make sure that the houses that we get to recommend them actually matches their criteria. We give them a good set of guide questions as to determining what they actually need, or what they would actually want, and what are the next steps that they need to take. We get to help them schedule showing appointments. Showing appointments are meetups that we have with the buyers so that we can show them houses. I think in the Philippines that's what you call house trips or house tripping. I don't know how do they call it, but basically you go to the house and then you look at it, and then your agent get to show you what it looks like. So those are our showing appointments. And then another thing that we do is that we write and negotiate the contract to protect the buyer's rights. So as buyer agents, we get to be the one to write the offer for them, and then we submit it to the seller agent or the agent representing the seller. And then we get to negotiate on the terms. If it is acceptable, then we can go under contract wherein we start settling the sale of the house. Now, these can be very tough, especially at this market when the seller is more powerful compared to the buyers. You may notice that if you go on TikTok, or like if you're going to go on Facebook, there's a lot of memes that are going on that this is a seller's market and the sellers being snobby and all with the buyers. That's actually the face of the market right now. Sellers have a lot of power with them. And if they put a house right now, there are times that we're going to put a house in the market, and that by the end of the evening, we are already getting offers because buyers want to buy houses that fast. So as a buyer agent, we have to be really, really tough in terms of negotiation. We have to be very creative in making offers that is very acceptable to the seller and very attractive, so that we can make sure that the buyer's offer that we write for our buyers will be the one that's going to be successfully taken. Reviews, inspections, reports, request repairs, and etc. These are actually parts of the actual transaction wherein you're already under contract. So if you're not as familiar with it, it may sound a little bit of like, whoa, what's that, Chris? But as you go along, you get to be more familiarized. These are actual inspections of the house. Like, do we have a leaking pipe? Do we have a loose door or something? That's kind of like what happens during inspection. And basically they get to negotiate right after, or not right immediately after, but like after that, they get to negotiate as to who's going to fix it, who's going to pay for the repairs, and etc. ensures everything is on track, including the lending and for the smooth transaction to closing. That's actually very important because sellers sometimes, because they know that they're the ones selling the houses, they can get a little bit lenient on those things. So as the buyer agent, we want to make sure that we are on track. It doesn't mean that if you are working with a seller agent, you get to keep loose on it, but it's always something to bear in mind. Whichever side you are working on, you want to make sure that you are on track of everything. If the inspection is scheduled today, you would want to make sure that you get to remind your agent that, hey, just tapping you on the back, today is going to be your inspection. You may want to watch out for it. And then in a couple of days, remind them as well that, hey, we're waiting for the results of the reports. Let's make sure that we get them on time. That way, you can make sure that if the closing or the end of the transaction is scheduled at the 30th, then you're sure that at the 30th, it is going to happen. Otherwise, it's just going to go up and down the hill, and then eventually it's going to fall off. That's something that you don't want to happen. Okay, last thing, mostly paid by the seller upon closing of the transaction. That's actually true, unless, special scenarios. Buyers don't get to buyers don't get to pay the agent while they're seeing houses. They just get paid once the transaction closes. So that is also the reason why a lot of agents doesn't necessarily want to work with buyers as much as they want to work with sellers. Because imagine if you have a buyer who's very fickle, you can get to show them 20 houses in just one whole week. That will cost you petrol. That will cost you the time that you have to spend with them. If you're buying them coffee as well, you're going to pay for all of that, and you're not going to get paid until they actually decide that they're going to buy a house, get accepted, and close on it. If eventually they decided that that they're not going to buy a house anymore, that's all on you. You're not going to get paid for all of those things that you've already spent on them. So that's kind of like one of the challenge of being an agent. But it's also nice because, for example, the stories that you get to also build when you're helping out buyers. There was one time we also get to help a buyer buy a house because they're getting married, and she was very, very excited. And of course, nobody can replace that, like the happiness on the bride's face. She finally bought her dream house. So that's also really, really good. Okay, now let's take a look a little bit about what a listing agent is. So we're already familiar with what the buyer agent does. What does a listing agent do? A listing agent is more on the seller. Not more on the seller, but actually on the seller side. They get to help market the house. There's a lot of different strategies that we can market the house or put it on the market. You can do social media marketing. You can do digital marketing. You can do ads on it, open houses, etc. At the very beginning of the pandemic, this became a challenge to all of the agents because there's a lot of different strict regulations and policies. Fortunately, we get to adapt really, really good about it. Right now, some of the states, like I mentioned yesterday on our first webinar, some of the states are already maskless. They are also doing open houses now. They're getting more open as to getting people in one spot. So right now, some of the states, for example, we're working with a team in California right now. For the houses that they have, we get to do open houses, but not so much in the mega open house, but at least we'll get to do open houses again. You can also market it online. So Facebook, Instagram, some agents are actually very, very on camera right now. They get to do TikToks about it. You can also look for it. So you can find strategies for yourself and for your agents too once you start working with them. Just try to be very open and creative about it. It doesn't not help you if you're going to look at what other people are also doing. It gives you more ideas and inspiration. So just try to be open and receptive about what other people are also doing, and it will give you a very good insight as to how to also market the houses that your agents are listing. With that, we're also going to tackle that on our other webinar section, which will be, if I'm not mistaken, around day 4 or 5, I think. We're going to talk a little bit about the marketing strategies. And then what else? We also get to help find a buyer for the homes. Now, since we're marketing the listing or the property that is for sale, we also call that a listing. We get to be the one to help them find the buyer. The challenge from before is that it's kind of hard to find buyers. But right now, because it's seller's market, it's very, very easy to find buyers right now. The issue, most likely, I'm not saying that it goes for all houses. Sometimes there are still challenges, but mostly the issue now is to choose which offer to take. Now, even with buyer agents and listing agents, both, we don't get to be the one making the decision for those. We don't get to decide which house fits the buyer. We don't get to decide which offer to take. We only get to guide our clients and let them know that, hey, for now, this is the best offer that you have, or this is the best house for you. And then we get to help them balance what are the pros and cons between those decision-making points. And then whichever they choose, basically that's where we're going to go for. We can only advise them. We cannot make the decision for them. So we want to make sure that we give them all the decision points and factors in order for them to make the wise decision that they need to do. Houses are one of the biggest financial decisions that they're going to make. So we want to make sure that they're making the right decision based on a very informative collation of data that we have for them. What else? So they're typically goal-oriented type A personalities. So these are really, really tough agents. So if you're going to talk to agents a lot, you can definitely, actually for all agents, not just listing agents. This is also the reason why whenever we're placing and coaching virtual assistants, we get to let them know that if you're going to be working with a real estate agent, you have to also toughen up. Sometimes these people are very direct to the point. They're very straightforward. They're no nonsense business people. So sometimes if the virtual assistant is kind of a little bit soft, we tend to let them know that you have to expect these kinds of scenarios so that they can also commit themselves as to, okay, this is what's going to happen. This is how we talk. And that's something that I also bear in mind. It's not because they hate you or something. We're not going to put you in that position, but it's more of them having that kind of power struggle all the time, power dynamic for their business. And that's just normal for most of them. But guys, I also want to point out, since we're talking about personalities and the dynamic between an agent and a virtual assistant, please do not let yourself be on the bad side of that dynamic. If you're not comfortable with what you're having with your client, please make sure that you get to talk to them about it, or you talk to someone that you feel like can better represent you. And that's okay. Because if you're not comfortable in a dynamic that you are in, that's not good. If you feel like you're getting pushed around, if you feel like you're getting yelled at already, that is enough to already voice that out. Do not let yourself be pushed around. That's not good. This is a working environment. And the reason you're choosing to be a virtual assistant is not because of just anything, but also because of the convenience and comfort that we promised you at the very beginning. So if you're having those kinds of trouble and you need to talk to somebody, please let us know. We definitely want to help you out. And if you need coaching about those kinds of stuff, please let us know. We want to make sure that you also feel empowered into voicing out what you are feeling right now about those kinds of dynamics. Moving on. We also get to negotiate best terms and top dollar for the sellers. I've already talked about the offer, so we are talking about the next item. Best terms and top dollar for the seller. So we're talking about the best terms for the transaction. For example, contingency-wise, are there any contingencies that we're going to expect? Do they get to leave the house immediately after the closing, or do they still get to stay? Because sometimes that's an issue, especially now in the pandemic. And the top dollar, meaning they get the best price for their house. That's very important for sellers, of course. They want to sell their house, they have their own plan going on. It's either they're going to buy a new house, they're going to buy a bigger house, or they're going to move on another state. As you may have noticed, they have like a timeline. Sometimes we get a new job, we move. Sometimes we are getting married, we buy a new house and we move. So those kind of things and those milestones happen. And immediately the next thing that we get to do is move. On that note, it's very important that we also get the motivation of the seller and we give them the best term and the top dollar for their house. Understand how to market the homes well. That's very important. We get to make decisions strategy-wise on how to market the house. Sometimes open houses are not as applicable with all houses. Sometimes some houses has to have a very specific strategy. For example, something to think about. If you have a murder house, how are you going to sell them? That's just it, right? So you have to be very, very creative. That's actually true. There are a lot of instances that you make those kinds of tough decisions. I'm not saying that all houses in America is like murder houses, but like seeing their reactions. No, guys, not all of them are like that. But yeah, that's kind of like one of the toughest decisions to make. Like, how are you going to market those? Are you going to lean into it, or what are you going to do? Some states, they don't get to disclose those kinds of things. Some states, they have to tell those things. So, for example, have you ever thought how they sold the Amityville house? That house is not just there. Somebody owns it. So somebody sold it. That's the truth. That's just the truth. So, guys, that's kind of like a thing. So you have to be very strategic on what are the decisions you're going to make, how are you going to market them, and so on and so forth. That's just like the top of mind, guys. That's not all the houses. Okay, what else? Usually less organized than a buyer's agent. That's kind of true, but we don't. That's kind of true, but we don't want that to happen. So we want to make sure that if you're working with any agent, you want to help them out in being organized, keep track of their calendar, and so on and so forth. Because usually the expectation is that, oh, I have a virtual assistant, they can take care of that for me. So we want to make sure that we get to set up those kinds of expectations straight out. So if you're going to handle their calendar, sometimes you really need to be hands-on for those kinds of stuff. Usually not as good as follow-up. A little bit of a secret. All agents are actually not as good when it comes to follow-up. We have to make sure that we get to keep them track of it, because agents, they're really, really busy. They go to soccer games for their kids. They sell houses. They do open houses. Sometimes they don't even have time to sit down and make that phone call. And so, yeah, we want to make sure that we get to help them out. Now, the last slide that we have for today. Oh, we actually have still a couple, but I can definitely send you out these slides instead so that I don't have to like overwhelm you with what's happening. These are actually usually taken like a whole day, guys, and I don't want to overwhelm all of you with like what's going on. But I am going to give you a gift like I promised yesterday. We're going to give you guys a set of roadmaps today, or at least your day, because mine is almost ending. These are actually the transaction processes that we have step by step. This is actually a shortened one. So we did put out that it is a summarized list. So it goes from the agent meeting the sellers, the photos being taken, the marketing materials. These we're going to talk about day 4 or day 5. I'm not sure. I'm going to have to look on our outline. And then marketing of the home, communicating for open houses, etc. And then the negotiating process up until the closing. The reason why I'm not going to go so much in depth about this is because if you're going to look at it as a list, you may get lost because some of you are going to get a little visual and then what does that mean? And that's very, very understandable. So instead, I'm going to send you guys this slide, I guess together with the slide from yesterday. And then I'm also going to send you a copy of a roadmap that we usually use. It's actually a roadmap from a brokerage that we were working with. So be very careful who you share that with. But that's for your personal views. You can use that. You can take a look at it and use it as a guide. Thank you, Hazel. We love that you love it too. We want to make sure that we get to share you these kinds of resources. We'll make it available in the group so that you can download it anytime, take a look at it, use it as a guide. Even if you're already starting working with a client, you can always use it anytime you need it. So we'll use that. We'll put that there today, or at least give us your night, your time at night. We're gonna have to upload it into group, and then at least hopefully that will guide you a little bit better of what actually happens. Again, if you have any question about those kinds of graphs and images and graphics, just let us know and we'll help you as much as we can. All right, so that's the summarized process. You're going to get those and then the roadmap. And these are some of the myths that we have in real estate. Now, these are actually some of the things that we've already discussed. Just to emphasize, not all real estate agents are rich. not all the agents, guys, are rich. That's actually true. As I mentioned earlier in the beginning of our webinar, agents are actually getting paid off by commission. And for example, for buyer agents, they don't get paid unless the transaction has closed. And imagine if you're working off of a commission are also getting split between you and the brokerage that you're having your license with. So sometimes even if you're going to get paid 6% of a house at most, or 3%, for example, the worst case scenario is like 1.5%. You're going to have to split it up with the brokerage, and then you have to pay taxes. And then that's where you get all to pay the expenses, like the inspectors, the inspectors, the photographers, the stagers for the house. We're going to talk about that in day 4. And then that's the only, after all of that expense, that's the only thing that you get to take home with you. So it's not as easy as people may think. That is the reason why, again, as I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, it is very important that we get to be knowledgeable about these things. So as, for example, for your case as virtual assistants, you also get to guide them as to what decisions to make. One of the things that we often talk about with real estate agents and team leaders whenever we're coaching and training and strategizing with them is that, you know, you have to plan your finances well, because sometimes not at all that you see a shiny object, you get to buy it, because it's not as easy to get money to come by, even if houses are selling like pancakes. So we have to be very, very mindful about those. But that doesn't mean that you don't get paid. that just is basically being mindful of what's going to happen next. I suppose being a trainer and a coach for some time now, the best advice that I could give to both virtual assistants and real estate agents is that they have to be mindful of what they're going to do in the long run, so that they can get to prolong their careers, both of them. You know, because if the client that you're working with is not successful, the more that you're going to be losing the security of working together. So you want to make sure that they make the right choices, so that you can also make the right choices for you. All right. Aside from that, real estate is easy. That's another myth. Real estate is not always easy. It can be easy if you know what you're doing, but it's not something that you just pick off the crossroads. So you have to be very mindful, again, about what you know, what you need to research, and be very receptive about which people to talk to, who to talk to, and who can actually help you. So that's another thing. Real estate agents do not make a salary. They have to hustle. So it is not as easy. They have to go out there, talk to a lot of different people from all different backgrounds. Some of them work 96 hours in a week. So it's not just a full-time role, it's your life, basically. It's your life. So they really have to know how to balance. As virtual assistants, we get to train VAs to be more sensitive when it comes to time management, so that they also know how to manage the agents that they're working with. You have to feel empowered to let your agent know that, hey, wait up, your calendar says this and that. And so at this day, you're not going to do anything. You have to attend this and that. So you have to be very careful for those. Otherwise, your agents will die out on you. So you have to be very, very careful on how you treat your agents and how you help them out. And then what else, Chris? Anyone can sell real estate. I guess by now we already know that that's not true. Real estate requires finesse and experience. It's very, very true. There was one point in real estate industry wherein everybody, I think even now, they're like, oh, real estate is easy. So they jump in, they enroll to real estate classes, they take their exam, they get licensed. After the whole year, they give up because they're like, oh, it's not for me. I can't do it. It's hard. Because that's the thing. Real estate is not as easy, and it's not like anyone can do it. It takes resilience, perseverance, and a lot of determination and being able to work with the right people. What else? Agents have to know state laws and their contracts and able to handle very difficult people and be expert negotiators. That is true. Very, very true. For example, as you know, real estate deals with a lot of paperwork. It's not all as fancy as talking to people. They like you, they sell houses. There are also a lot of paperwork that is in it. So, yesterday we were talking about transaction coordinators. They get to handle those kinds of paperwork. As agents, we have to be familiarized with all of those paperwork. We have to know what's in those paperwork. Paperwork, I mean, they are contracts, guys. These are actual contracts that are written and submitted for deeds and rights to a real estate property. So if you are an agent, you want to make sure that you're through and through, you're familiar with it, you know what you're talking about, you know the ins and outs of each contract. It's not the same throughout across the nation. So you have to be patient into reading through it. For example, if you want to see some of them, you can actually go online and look up a specific state and the paperwork for real estate, and then you can read through them so that you can sample it. But yeah, they are very different from state to state. So you have to carefully read through them like books, and then you have to be familiarized with them. We'll try to show them. We'll try to show you guys some once we start discussing about the TC position, so that you can know what we're talking about. We'll show you some of them. We have some samples. Okay, so that's about it for today. Again, our assignments, my assignment, I guess, is to share with you guys the roadmap and so that you get a good overview of our transaction process. And also, I have another gift for you guys. We're also going to give away in the group, so everybody is going to have it. We're going to give away a real estate term dictionary or glossary. Yeah, we're going to give that away as well. So if there's a word, for example, that we've mentioned, that we've mentioned in today's webinar, we're also going to give you guys a glossary of terms, so that when you get started working as a real estate VA, you can also have an idea when your agent says something and then they're like, oh, what's that? So yeah, you can also get to find out what those means and be more familiar with it. If you have anything to add on it, please feel free to comment on the media file, and then we'll make sure to add it so that everybody else can also see it.